where he's now about to leave his body. Many things happened before in this, so it's chapter 9 of Canto 1. And he had lots and lots and lots of verses where he's speaking things, and he just finished speaking all those things. And now he's going to depart. Grandfather Bhisma. Oh. So here's text 43. Sutta Goswami said, Sutta Goswami. This is still first canto, and Sutta Goswami is narrating. There's a group of sages headed by Shonaka Rishi. They're listening and asking questions. So Sutta Goswami said, thus, Bhismadeva merged himself in the Supersoul. What? He merged himself in the Supersoul. What does that mean? We'll find out. Lord Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, with his mind, speech, sight, and actions, and thus he became silent, and his breathing stopped. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The stage attained by Bhismadeva while quitting his material body is called Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Because he merged his self into thinking of the Lord and his mind into remembering his different activities. He chanted the glories of the Lord, and by his sight he began to see the Lord personally present before him, and thus all his activities became concentrated upon the Lord without deviation. Nirvikalpa Samadhi. This is the highest stage of perfection, and it is possible for everyone to attain this stage by practice of devotional service. Good luck, all of you. Possible. The devotional service to the Lord consists of 9 devotional principles of service activities, and they are, it's a list of 9. Hearing, chanting, remembering, serving lotus feet, worshiping, praying, executing the orders, fraternizing, or friendship, and fully surrendering. That's 9. Any one of them, or all of them, are equally competent to award the desired result, but they require to be practiced persistently under the guidance of an expert devotee of the Lord. The first item, hearing, is the most important item of all, and therefore hearing of the Bhagavad Gita and later on Srimad Bhagavatam is essential for the serious candidate who wants to attain the stage of Bhismadeva. At the end, the unique situation at Bhismadeva's time of death can be attained even though Lord Krishna may not be personally present. His words of the Bhagavad Gita or those of the Srimad Bhagavatam are identical with the Lord. They are sound incarnations of the Lord, and one can fully utilize them to be entitled to attain the stage of Sri Bhismadeva, who was one of the 8 Vasus. Every man or animal must die at a certain stage of life, but one who dies like Bhismadeva attains perfection. And one who dies, forced by the laws of nature, dies like an animal. That is the difference between a man and an animal. The human form of life is especially meant for dying like Bhismadeva. Just a little historical background. there's a reference here that's explained earlier, but he's one of 8 vasus. Who are the vasus? There's not a lot explained about who the vasus are, but the little bit that is said about them, they're residents of the heavenly realm. There's more than 8, but there's 8 principal vasus with many subordinate vasus. And it's something like a post, because from time to time there are different personalities who are those 8 principal vasus. And they're Kshatriyas, they're military, very, very powerful warriors. They provide some kind of protection for the residents of the heavenly realm, for the demigods. And they're entitled to some of the privileges that demigods are entitled to, like being present at big sacrifices and things like that. And previously, before Grandfather Bhisma was Grandfather Bhisma, he was a vasu in the heavenly realm. He made an offense, or a violation of proper etiquette, and he was cursed to take birth on earth. And it's more than just a violation of etiquette. He was the vasus were traveling about, and the 8 brothers and their wives, and they happened to, in the course of their travel, they visited the hermitage of Vashishta. Now Vashishta is even above the heavenly region. He has his own planet, one of the Sapta Rishis, at the topmost part of the heavenly realm. And they became very attracted. The wife of the chief of the 8 vasus, his name was Dyo, D-Y-O. His wife became very attracted to the Surabhi cow, and the calf of the Surabhi cow of Vashishta. And she asked her husband, "Could you get that calf? I have a friend, I'd like to give her the calf as a gift. She's a good friend." He said, "Sure." Big mistake. Taking the property of a brahmana. So they managed, the 8 brothers together, managed to take the calf of Vashishta away when Vashishta was performing his midday duties, etc., etc. He was absent from his ashram. When he came back, he saw the calf was missing. And he cursed all 8 of them, that they should leave their heavenly position and descend to the earthly realm. They heard that Vashishta had made that curse. They came back immediately, profusely apologized. "Here's your calf back. We're really sorry. Please forgive us." And then he said, the curse that I gave was appropriate for the behavior of stealing the property of a brahmana. So because you brought the calf, Nandini was the name of the calf, you brought the calf back, I'll give you the following benediction, that you will take birth on earth, but shortly after you take birth on earth, you'll be relieved of that earthly existence, and you can come back to the realm of the vasus. But the elder brother that was responsible actually for stealing Nandini, he won't come back until the end of his long, long duration of life. And that person, the vasu, was Bhismadeva. And there's some further detail. You like stories? Okay. When the 8 brothers, the Vasus, heard this curse and then the reprieve, they approached, in the heavenly realm, they approached Ganga, personified, and requested her, can you please make some arrangement to help us out of this situation? So she also had been cursed because she and another king were attending a function in Brahmaloka, and the king was casting lustful glances, and she was acknowledging his lustful glances. And Brahma saw, so he cursed him, you should leave the heavenly realm. So she took birth on earth, and there's like a very interesting detail. She was roaming about here and there in a personified form, and there was a king, and she became very attracted to that king, and she sat on the right lap of the king, saying, woo, 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 why don't you marry me? And he said, in Vedic culture, the daughter or the daughter-in-law will sit on the right lap, the wife will sit on the left. Because you sat on my right lap, you will become my daughter-in-law. I was attending a marriage in Potomac, where it was a South Indian marriage. I never saw this before, but part of the procedure was the daughter, who was being given by her father to the young man to marry him. She's a 28-year-old, lady, and she's sitting on the right lap of her father, and father gives her in marriage to the young man. So I sent that to the parents. They said, hey, it's right in the Mahabharata. So she later, the king had a son named Santanu. Santanu developed a fascination for Ganga. She agreed to become his wife on a condition. The condition was, you never object to anything I do. So he agreed, because he was very attracted to Ganga. And so the first 7 boys that were born were those other 7 brothers of the Vasus, and shortly after they were born, she threw them in the river. He didn't say anything. He didn't feel good about it. But her understanding was, this is my pledge to the Vasus to deliver them so they could go back to the heavenly realm. And then son number 8 was born, and the king, Santanu, said, don't. She said, that's it, I'm leaving. And off she went with this little baby boy. And where she went, interestingly, she went to Parshuram, as he got a little older, to learn military skill. She went to Vishishta, the same one that had cursed. She went to Vishishta to have him trained in scriptures and other things, Jyotisha and things like that. And there was another priest whose name I can't recall, not a well-known personality. This is from Mahabharata. And when he was a young, some 12, 13 years later, Santanu was again in the forest by the river Ganga, and he noticed that the river was almost dried up. Very, very shallow. And normally it's very, fast-flowing river. So what's the cause of this? You know the answer? It was his son, who is now a 12, 13-year-old boy, and he had learned through skills of mystic weapons to stop the flow of the river Ganges. So his mother, Ganga, took him by the hand and brought him before Santanu and said, "This is your son. He's been trained this way, that way, the other way. And my responsibility on earth is now finished. I'm returning." His name is Deva Vrata. And his name later became Bhisma when he made a vow to help his father get the hand of a fisherman's daughter in marriage. It's a long story, so I won't go further with the story part. But that's like just there's mentioned here, he was one of 8 Vasus in his previous life. And the interesting part, the specific, because all kinds of stories and instructions that he gave to Yudhisthira about how to rule the world, how to be an emperor of the world, in case you wanted to know how to be an emperor of the world, you could read. It's in Mahabharata, it's in a condensed form here in the Bhagavatam. And he finished narrating. He then recognized it was a time for a yogi to leave his body and ascend to the spiritual realm. And so he stopped speaking. He began his instructions to Yudhisthira for 12, 13 verses. He's offering prayers to Krishna, and now he's departing. So the procedure, Bhismadeva is a pure devotee, so he doesn't need procedure. However, he does know procedure. He's a yogi. He knows mystic yoga, and he's following the mystic yoga process. And the mystic yoga process is to withdraw the senses from sense objects of this world. And in that withdrawing of the senses, the subtle senses, not your limbs going your body, but the subtle senses withdrawn and consolidated in the mind. And the mind, more subtle than the senses, then becomes fixed on the destination. In this case, his destination is Krishna. It said earlier that besides knowing all about Krishna, I've mentioned this many times now, Prabhupada explained specifically his worshipable deity was four-armed Narayana. He wrote this little letter to Tosan Krishna in 1968. And that his destination after departing his body was Mahavaikuntha, the worshipper of Narayana in Vaikuntha. That's his mode of worship. So the senses, the sense of sight, sense of speech, everything became amalgamated within the mind, and the mind became absorbed in samadhi, or Nirvikalpa Samadhi. And in that Nirvikalpa Samadhi, he is meditating on the form of the Lord and the pastimes of the Lord with no distractions. Now for somebody that's on the level of Bhismadeva, or any exalted person, let's say Srila Prabhupada, or Bhaktisiddhanta, or Bhaktivinoda Thakur, or our great acharyas, while engaging in things of this world, they're connecting with those things of this world in service to Krishna. So Krishna is at the center. But this Nirvikalpa Samadhi is that activity of connecting with the world around him. Bhismadeva is no longer making that connection. He had done everything. So the diplomacy, the relationships, his care, his profile, his what he did, what his life was made up of, battles and so forth and so on. Those are things that were done in service to Krishna. That's all stopped, and now it's in the subtle realm, and the mind fully absorbed in Krishna thought. So, what Krishna says to Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita is to do both. Perform your prescribed duty and always think of me. And when prescribed duties are finished, you better help him. Why don't you get up and show him? Okay. It's not a practice. Well, it's an exalted stage that elevated devotees may be able to attain. I mean, Prabhupada doesn't say may be able to attain. It says they can. They can fully attain. Every man or animal must die in certain states of life. One who dies like Bhismadeva attained perfection, and one who dies forced by the laws of nature dies like an animal. The human form of life is especially meant for dying like Bhismadeva. Now, there's a number of situations in the Bhagavatam that deal with death because it's just one of those things. It's going to happen for everyone. So it's how do you prepare yourself? And what's it like when you're going to this supreme destination? So it's this particular kind of detail isn't so often described because the kind of capacity that Bhismadeva had, most persons don't. I mean, it seems that during the time of Bhismadeva, Kshatriyas all knew this Ashtanga Yoga process. They just knew it. Like Dhritarashtra. This is chapter 9. In chapter 13, when Vidura comes back from his pilgrimage after being away from the royal family and everything for so many years, and the Kurukshetra battle is over, and Yudhishthira is now the king, and his sons, Dhritarashtra's sons, are dead. He goes back for one purpose only, and that's to deliver his elder brother, Dhritarashtra. And he's really heavy. He gets him in a private situation, and he lets him have it. And says, you're going to die. And you die attached like this, it's not a good situation for you. Because so many bad things were done, and you're going to be held responsible for those bad things that were done. You know what they are. I mean, this isn't the way that he spoke, but this is the essence. And you should let go. Your teeth are falling out. Your liver isn't working. All the signs are there. Your days are numbered. So let go. And go to the forest. Go when no one else knows that you're going, because otherwise they won't let you go, because you're a blind person of elderly age and no one's going to let you go. So right now, let's go. So they went into the forest, and Dhritarashtra having let go, had the capacity of concentration that he sat in a meditative state with such intensity that his body burst in flames. That's pretty intense meditation. And his wife, Gandhari, being faithfully attached to her husband, entered into that same fire. As his body was burning, her body burned also. And that was the end of Dhritarashtra. But he knew the process. That was my point. Now, he left in its particular way because he wasn't qualified like Bhismadeva was qualified. And we're all going to leave, so that's Prabhupada's point in the purport. What's the condition that we're in when we leave? And what are we doing now to qualify or prepare ourselves to leave and go to a better situation? In Bhismadeva's case, to go to the spiritual world. Should I read another verse, or should we just stop there and discuss? Our hostess, what would you like? Huh? One more. Okay. Knowing that Bhismadeva had merged into the unlimited eternity of the Supreme Lord, all present there became silent, like birds at the end of the day. Purport: to enter into or become merged into the unlimited eternity of the Supreme Absolute means to enter the original home of the living being. The living beings are all component parts and parcels of the Absolute Personality of Godhead, and therefore they are eternally related with Him as the servitor and the served. The Lord is served by all His parts and parcels as the complete machine is served by all its parts and parcels. Any part of the machine removed from the whole is no longer important. Similarly, any part and parcel of the Absolute detached from the service of the Lord is useless. The living beings, or in the material world, are all disintegrated parts of and parcels of the Supreme Whole, and they are no longer as important as the original parts and parcels. There are, however, more integrated living beings who are eternally liberated. The material energy of the Lord, called Durga Shakti, or the superintendent of the prison house, takes charge of the disintegrated parts and parcels, and thus they undergo a conditioned life under the laws of material nature. When the living being becomes conscious of this fact, he tries to go back home, back to Godhead, and thus the spiritual urge of the living being begins. This spiritual urge is called Brahma Jigyasa, or inquiry about Brahman. Principally, this Brahma Jigyasa is successful by knowledge, renunciation, and devotional service to the Lord. Jnana, or knowledge, means knowledge of everything, of Brahman, the Supreme. Renunciation means detachment of material affection, and devotional service is the revival by practice of the original position of the living being. The successful living beings who are eligible to enter into the realm of the Absolute are called Gyanis, the Yogis, and the Bhaktas. The Gyanis and the Yogis enter into the impersonal rays of the Supreme, but the Bhaktas enter into the spiritual planets known as the Vaikunthas. in these spiritual planets, the Supreme Lord as Narayana predominates. And the healthy, unconditioned living beings there live by rendering loving service to the Lord in the capacity of servant, friend, parents, or fiancé. There, the unconditioned living beings enjoy life in full freedom with the Lord, whereas the impersonalist Gyanis and yogis enter into the impersonal glowing effulgence of the Vaikuntha planets. There he said it twice. The Vaikuntha planets are all self-illuminating like the sun, and the rays of the Vaikuntha planets are called the Brahmajyoti. The Brahmajyoti is spread unlimitedly, and the material world is but a covered portion of an insignificant part of the same Brahmajyoti. This covering is temporary, and therefore it is a sort of illusion. Final paragraph. Bhismadeva, as a pure devotee of the Lord, entered the spiritual realm in one of the Vaikuntha planets, where the Lord in his eternal form of Partha Sarati predominates over the unconditioned living beings who are constantly engaged in the service of the Lord. The love and affection which binds the Lord and the devotee are exhibited in the case of Bhismadeva. Bhismadeva never forgot the Lord in his transcendental feature as the Partha Sarati, and the Lord was personally before Bhismadeva while he was passing to the transcendental world. That is the highest perfection of life. So what about us? Are you going to be able to see Krishna when the time it comes to leave your body? Not very likely, is it? So now what? What about us? What about you and me? And Dad and Mom and your friends? What about us? Huh? Good question. Depends. The answer is, it depends on how we have cultivated Krishna bhakti internally. Just in the morning morning class, I was discussing with the devotees from China about the second verse of Manashiksha. Shri Manashiksha. Shri Manashiksha is a short book, 11 verses, written by Raghunath Das Goswami, where he is explaining and presenting, not so much expanding, but just presenting the principles of spontaneous devotional service, or Raga Marg, as it was given to him by Srup Damodar, as it was given to him by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, how to cultivate a love like the residents of Vrindavan have for Krishna, for Radha Krishna. I mentioned in the morning class, in Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, there's a section where he describes in detail sadhana bhakti, and the very next section is Raganuga Bhakti, or Raga Bhakti. The very first verse in the Raga Bhakti section is that one should live in Vrindavan. And if it's not possible to live in Vrindavan within the mind, one should meditate on life in Vrindavan as the residents of Vrindavan live their life in Vrindavan. So become attached to contemplating the residents of Vrindavan and their activities with Krishna, etc. So the same answer to this question. If we're not fortunate enough to, as Bhismadeva was so fortunate, that Krishna was directly before him, or Haridas Thakur, that Lord Chaitanya was directly before him, then within the mind, in this lifetime we cultivate within the mind becoming attached to the holy land of Vrindavan and the associates of Krishna in Vrindavan. This is specifically the Ragamarg answer to that question. Now there are Vaishnavas that aren't in the path of Ragamarg, and there are Vaishnavas that are on the path of Ragamarg. So for us, that's the encouragement, is to do our sadhana very nicely so that naturally the thought of Krishna is there. Commonly Prabhupada would say like this, take the impression of the deity, and in different intervals of the day, that impression of the deity is recalled within the mind. And so that by practice and practice and practice, the mind one will become attached to a particular deity. As it was in the case of Bhisma, he was attached to the form of Parthasarathi, the chariot driver of Arjuna. Now, when he's departing this world, Krishna is not on the chariot driving the chariot of Arjuna, but he's envisioning that feature of Krishna that his heart is most attracted to, although Krishna is before him. That's that's the form that his mind is most attracted to. So that's what we do. If we don't have the option, Krishna, if he wants, he can make himself visible before us at any time, at the time of death or any time. But otherwise, through the cultivation of devotion to Krishna, internally, again, it's internal. There are external things we do, and the purpose of those external things is, of course, purification. But bringing the mind to Krishna, what the mind does is so important. Not only what the body does, what the mind does, as we're doing what the body does. And then the mood that the mind is being directed is also very important. So that's our sadhana. And when the sadhana is done nicely, it can become spontaneous. And that's the raga bhakti platform. Okay. 2 verses, not bad. Any discussion? Uh-huh.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. My question would be about the last verse. The Lord was personally assisting Bhismadeva with through the transcendental passage. How long is that passage?
How long was?
The way to transcendental world.
How long did it take for him to get there? That's what you're asking?
Like this? Because some other literature, they say sometimes you need to go like 9 days, then 40 days, and I don't know, everybody have different, I never experienced, or probably experienced, but I do not remember.
If one goes to the spiritual world, it's instant.
And it's instant, okay.
The language in the Bhagavatam is not as lightning and thunder, but lightning and illumination. That's how fast.
regardless the size of the universe, regardless the
That's correct. Regardless of the size of the universe and any other thing.
and the all this cover, whatever covered the universe,
No problem.
that sizes. Okay, all right.
Because the transcendental realm is, as it says in Ishopanishad, it's far away, but it's very near as well. That is to say, that the connection with Krishna isn't bound by time and space. It's not created or limited by time and space. So instantly, lightning and illumination. That's how fast. Now, if the destination is something else, then it's not a spiritual principle it's at play. There's other principles at play, material principles.
Thank you,
Okay.
Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I was wondering if you could elaborate on the when you mentioned that if one does not live in Vrindavan, one ought to meditate on Vrindavan or as the residents of Vrindavan meditate. I was wondering if you could elaborate on that.
I can get the verse for you and send it to you. I have it memorized, but the verse is by Rupa Goswami, and Jiva Goswami makes commentary. And the verse says very clearly, one should live in Vrindavan. And if that's not possible, then one should, in the mind, reside in Vrindavan and meditate on the residents of Vrindavan, the eternal associates of Krishna in Vrindavan. And that's the way that Prabhupada describes that in Nectar of Devotion. There are eternal associates of Krishna. They're called ragatmikas. Raga bhakti is meditating on the mood of a ragatmika bhakta. Here's an example that's given. Every year at Kartik time, we sing the Damodarastaka prayers. And one section of the Damodarastaka prayers, and one section of that whole pastime of Krishna being bound by Mother Jasoda, is there's a description of the dress, the sari that Yasoda is wearing, the flowers in Yasoda's hair, the perspiration as she's churning the butter, and so forth and so on. That's what it's talking about. Those particular features for one whose attraction, spiritual attraction, is the parental affection, is the meditation on the appearance of Mother Jasoda, the attire of Mother Jasoda, the ornaments of Mother Jasoda, etc. That's the Ragatmika. She is a Ragatmika personality. And there's others and there's others. So if one cannot physically actually live in Vrindavan, it has to be qualified to physically live in Vrindavan in any case. But to physically live in Vrindavan, if that's not possible, then mentally reside there, mentally hanker to reside there, and meditate on the activities of the eternal associates of Krishna, who are residents of Vrindavan. And that's in their full range, all their features, their conversations, their moods of love, their exchanges with one another, their exchanges with Krishna. It becomes an object of one's absorption.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you so much for this topic. So deep. So is it that like when at the moment of death, like when you are able to think about Krishna or like associates of Krishna. So you come to the planet where Krishna comes first, like to the in material world, and get trained, and then you go to spiritual world, or it could be
That's correct. That's correct. What you said is correct. There's an apprentice program.
So just in the moment of death, like you need to be prepared, and that your mind naturally thinks about Krishna and devotees of Vrindavan. And you, like, doesn't matter where it happens, right? So it should be.
I don't follow what you're just, the second part of all of it. Say it slower and clearer.
Sure.
Help me.
So like, you just need to be ready any moment to think about Krishna and devotees in Vrindavan.
Well, then you practice and it becomes, when from practice comes some purity, and then comes some attachment, and then the mind just flows. You don't even have to practice anymore. So what's the point that you're making?
Yeah, so like that we need to be there right now anyway, like, because like couple of days ago, devotees in Donbass just like were killed. And they just died in a moment. So basically,
Devotees were doing what?
Devotees in there are devotees in Donbass Food for Life program. Just I think it was yesterday that the bomb
I'm not able to follow what you're saying for some reason. I don't know why.
sound.
Maybe hold it a little further away from your mouth.
Like yesterday, devotees were killed in Donbass. Food for Life devotees were killed by the bomb.
Okay. Now I got you.
Yeah, so like the wonderful devotees, quite young.
Okay.
So the death can just come in a moment. We see it every time. And so we need to be ready now, basically.
You want to know where they go? That's your question?
In a way, too, yes.
That's not your question. What's your question?
Yeah, it was my question, too, also.
Oh, well, besides that also, what was your question?
So we need to be ready now, right? Like we need to be ready now.
We need to be ready now. That's your point.
Yeah.
Sure. We don't know. I mean, we don't know. A car accident or who knows? And we don't know. And, and your husband and your son and, maybe they're gone and you're left. We don't know. So your point is we should be ready because we don't know. That's your point. Sure. But it's not a matter of fear. It's a matter of reality. If somebody living in Ukraine, it could happen more likely than in Palatine. The time is up. You're in a danger zone, and it could happen more likely than other places. Then it's less likely. But anything could happen. And when people get that sense of urgency, I mean, my thought is now, as you're speaking, my thought is going to Kadamba Kannada Swami. And he has probably, maybe, likely 1 year. We're not so fortunate. I mean, it's unfortunate, but he's also fortunate because he's on notice. And the messages that he's sharing with the devotee community are fantastic. Because it's reality. And he's very Krishna conscious. And now he's getting more Krishna conscious and more Krishna conscious because the clock is ticking and he knows. So your point is similar. We don't know. But it's not to get morbid or fearful. It's utilize moments. That was one of his message. How important is each moment? To utilize each moment properly. We could say that about how we chant our japa, mindful japa, because we don't know. but not just out of fear. There's a spiritual incentive to become attached to Krishna, and it's by this series of moments next to each next moment that has that immersion. And it's up to us. And where do they go? Who can say? The answer is depending upon where their consciousness was at the time they leave their body. And there's this kind, just be frank, there's a kind of notional idea that says, well, Lord Chaitanya will intervene because these are nice Hare Krishna devotees and he'll take them to the spiritual world. That's notional. But I don't know if that's what's going to happen. I'm not convinced that that's what's going to happen to everybody that's Hare Krishna devotee. Lord Chaitanya is going to intervene and take him to the spiritual world. My understanding is a little different. My understanding is 60%, 61%. Prabhupada, there was this one little message was being passed around. It was Bhakti Maharaj being quoted, having said, and then I heard Prabhupada say essentially this in a lecture, that one devotee said to Prabhupada, my life I was filled with abominable activity before I met you, and now I'm relieved from all of that abominable behavior and activity. I'm so indebted to you. And Prabhupada said, no. He said, actually, you're discontinuing your service from your previous life, and by my coming, that has now been revived. So now, don't let it happen another birth, but finish your business in this life. That's not like a threat, or it's a fearful thing. It's just a reality thing. And if we don't finish, then what? Whatever the previous platform of devotional service, we continue from there.
Thank you so much.
Like your son, I mean, he's playful and all those things, but there's some devotional features that are very obvious within him. And I'm sure as parents you see that, you appreciate that. He's playful like anything, but there's devotional like anything too. And he's taken birth in a family that's devotional and is getting an opportunity to go further. And it's up to him, it's up to you as parents and so forth. That's how it works. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Pass the microphone up.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Here, Prabhupada, in the previous verse, he mentioned Nirvikalpa Samadhi. And in Bhagavad Gita, 6th chapter also, he mentions Sampragnata and Asampragnata Samadhi. He mentions that these are Patanjali yogas.
Yes.
So is
Verse 20 to 23, chapter 6. Yes.
So is Nirvikalpa Samadhi also similar?
I don't know these are technical terms, and they probably have some similarity, but it's a one-to-one match. I don't know. Because Patanjali's, there are different systems to describe things. And it sounds like it's close, but I don't know if it's a one-to-one match.
And second question is, do the devotees, when they reach that stage, do they also, without actually practicing this, the Ashtanga Yoga, also go through this Samadhi, or?
I've never heard any scriptural reference saying one thing or the other. It would make sense, intuitively it would make sense, that in principle there's a lot of correspondence or a lot of matching. And, it so much depends upon faith and one's relationship with Krishna, etc. And when faith and relationship with Krishna are very strong, then he can align everything. And how you might describe it or what it might look like, etc. There's certainly going to be some similarity, whether it's, by practice of Ashtanga Yoga or just by Krishna's intervention. So that the soul that may not know all these details of Ashtanga Yoga can reach him. And therefore, what Prabhupada is emphasizing in the purport, both, is mind, the subtle senses become quiet, other than the mind, which is also a subtle sense. By subtle sense means the power of sight, not just seeing, the power of speech, not just speaking. So the subtle sense becomes quiet, and they become amalgamated within the mind, and the mind is fully directed by volition and by spontaneous attraction to Krishna. And a feature of Krishna that the mind is particularly attracted to, or even that the soul is particularly attracted to, then that's going to determine. So is there, without practicing Ashtanga Yoga, is a devotee going to undergo those stages? Likely.
Thank you, Maharaj.
You have something? Yeah. They're next to you, the other direction. This little girl, she wants to say something.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Why did wife of Dhritarashtra fall in the fire along with her husband?
You're really good at holding the microphone close, but so close I can't understand what you're saying. Let your dad help.
Why did why did wife of Dhritarashtra fall in the fire along with her husband?
Why did Gandhari join into the fire with her husband?
Yeah.
Because she was a very faithful and attached wife. It's not uncommon in Vedic culture, when the husband dies, the wife will enter into the funeral pyre of her husband. That happened with Pandu, remember? Pandu had two wives. You know their names? Madri and Kunti. Madri and Kunti. So there was a discussion between the two queens, who would stay and who would enter into the fire. And Madri said, "You're the capable one. You stay and take care of the boys, and I'll enter into the fire." And so that's what she did. Okay? I mean, there's other examples. But that was a common practice. Sati, when the wife enters into the fire of the husband at funeral time. Okay?
Okay, Maharaj. Thank
Okay.
you, Hare Krishna.
I bet your father has something too.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. A couple of questions I have. In the previous verse, we just read Srila Prabhupada writing, yogis also enter the Brahman like jnanis.
Yeah, he said it twice too.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, like, the destination of a jnani is definitely impersonal, Brahman, and devotees is Bhagavan. How is yogis?
I don't know.
Okay.
And he said it twice. No, here's I recall reading something like this. Something like this is, there are different destinations for yogis, depending upon their absorption. There's a different destination. So one of those destinations is this one, because that's their hankering, and they're fixing their mind upon Paramatma feature is an external thing, and their internal thing is more to become one with.
Yes, Maharaj.
But what's the destination of those yogis that aren't interested in becoming one with, but they simply fix their mind upon the Paramatma future? I can't recall what's written about that. I would think it would take a bit of research to find the answer to that one. But my recollection is there are multiple potential destinations, depending upon their heart's disposition.
Okay. Thank you, Maharaj. The next one here I have is, I was just thinking about Bhisma. In his previous life, he was a demigod and he has stolen the calf. And I see that in the next lifetime, he became not just an ordinary devotee,
That's right.
but a Mahajana.
Yes.
So how to correlate, did he do any extensive Vishnu Bhakti in the previous life anywhere? I was just thinking.
There are many cases where Krishna gives a description of, like with Dhruva, where Krishna gives a description of what's going to happen before it happens. Krishna is omniscient. There's still free will. It doesn't negate or diminish the operative principle of free will. At the same time, Krishna knows of things that are going to happen before they happen. So similarly, there was a purpose for Bhishma's taking birth to assist in Krishna's pastimes. Like demigods taking birth on earth to assist in Krishna's pastimes.
Okay.
To assist in Krishna's pastimes. So some function of Bhismadeva becoming Bhismadeva to assist in Krishna's pastimes, which doesn't directly answer your question, which is, was he a great devotee? He eventually became a Mahajan. No, one could ask the same thing about who was Prahlad Maharaj and who was Bali Maharaj in their previous life. And there are different answers to, for example, who was Prahlad Maharaj before he was Prahlad Maharaj? Who was he in his previous life? One answer is there in Hari Bhakti Vilas, that he was a fallen Brahmin. And there's another description in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 10, where he was sent from the spiritual world to teach the way of pure devotion. So there can be different situations, even for, and who was Bali Maharaj before he was Bali Maharaj? We don't know. But that's your question. What was the position of Bhismadeva before he was Bhismadeva? So he was chosen by the personality of God to serve him in a particular way, likely because he had some very strong attraction, but also some purification needed, because otherwise a Kshatriya doesn't steal the property of a Brahmin intentionally. Even if it's unintentional, then it's grievous consequences. King Nriga became a lizard when it was unintentional.
Yeah.
So, was Bhishma a great personality? He was definitely a great personality. Was he a great devotee? He was definitely a great devotee. But yet he did some bad stuff. Really bad stuff. Steal Vashishta's calf.
Sure, Maharaj.
Because your wife says, I want to give this to a friend. You don't do that. But he got a lot of mercy of Krishna, that's for sure.
Yes, Maharaj. I understand that everything in that connection with Krishna there is a plan behind even
Yes,
for
that's the
Bhishma.
point.
Okay. I see
And
that.
exactly what his position was that enabled him or facilitated him to become a Mahajan. I've not come across anything that gives the answer to that question. Favored by Krishna for sure, a devotee of Krishna for sure, but not a Mahajan. So how did he get to be a Mahajan? Some special favor of Krishna.
Sure, Maharaj. You have question. I have two more questions.
Go ahead, go for it. Go.
So
Go.
you were just referring Ragatmika Bhakta, and I was just thinking, can a Raganuga Bhakta who is practicing and once he becomes perfection in spontaneous love for Krishna, can he attain that position of a Ragatmika Bhakta?
No, they're eternal.
Okay.
He's filled with raga, but he's not the eternal associate. He's not in the same platform as those who are eternally perfect.
Okay, we cannot become.
There's not you don't become a card carrying I'm a Ragatmika and you're sadhana siddha. They don't have that program. But the eternally perfect are eternally perfect. Next.
Okay, one last question. Yesterday, when you were giving the class in the temple, I had a question, but I wasn't asking. The thing is, when we were talking about Nama Prabhu, how do one knows that one is progressing in Nama, I mean chanting from Nama Bhasa to Shuddha Nama or Nama Aparadha to Nama Bhasa? How would one
Real
know?
simple. Attachment.
Okay. Attachment to chanting, you mean?
Attachment to the name.
Okay.
Maya sakta manak parta yogam yunjan madashraya. So when there's attachment, it doesn't require effort. And when you know you're making advancement, when it's spontaneous, it's that there's attachment. And so the mind goes. The mind goes to what you're attached to. Just like you and your daughter, you're attached to each other. You don't have to, discipline your mind to think about her.
Mhm.
That's the fruit of attachment. And so one is progressing nicely when there's attachment. The mind just goes.
It's been a couple of years. Still, I don't have attachment to the name. So, I mean, how should
You
I-
and so many other sadhakas, but it's meant to happen by, here's Srila Prabhupada's explanation. It happens by regular practice and by sadhu sangha. It can happen by regular practice and by sadhu sangha. It's not automatic. And there's another requirement, and that is eagerness. Or take it a little stronger in greed, but eagerness for that attachment. But it's quite natural because that's who we are.
Sure, Maharaj.
It's not an artificial eagerness, it's a natural eagerness. Okay.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. So in this verse, we learned that Bhismadeva withdrew all his senses and focused his mind upon Krishna. But my understanding was throughout his life he was a pure devotee, and that's what his state was like. His mind was focused on Krishna. So why it is specifically
You asked this question previously, not specifically about Bhismadeva, but the same principled question. And it's not that he was deficient, but there's perfect, more perfect, most perfect. Remember that discussion?
Yes.
I remember two of them at least.
That was the peak of his perfection at that time.
It's the same question, same answer.
Okay. And just one more question I had, probably I might have asked it, Maharaj, but like there are some blocks of time in our day that we are so focused on some work that we might be very much disconnected from Krishna because we are just focused on something that requires focus. So what is that situation and how to practically be Krishna conscious rather than just like a robot in those moments, and have thought of Krishna?
It's gradual. It's the same as his question. It's where there's attachment to Krishna. So to be very, very focused on something is natural when something requires focus. And the simultaneous attachment to Krishna while something that requires focus is transcendently natural. And so how does the transcendental nature become awakened? By practice. It's not going to happen automatically. It's going to happen by cultivation. And when the cultivation is there, one can be very focused. I mean, let's take, for example, our founder Acharya. When he was doing what he was doing, he was absorbed in what he was doing. And he was absorbed in Krishna. I mean, it's very, very clear. Very clear.
Because right now, like my brain works in a material sense where it says that mind cannot focus on two.
It's a matter of the heart. If the heart is attached, look, you're attached to your family. You have 3 children. You're very attached to them. And they're attached to you, which is good. You'd be a pretty lousy parent if you weren't attached to your kids. So you're attached to your kids and they're attached to you. When you're absorbed in doing something you have to very much focus on, they're not in the foreground of your mind because you're very much focused on what you need to focus on. But they're there. Their thought is there. Because you're attached.
Got it.
Then the deeper and natural attachment is eternal attachment to Krishna. So how does that get processed? By serving initially dutifully and then lovingly. You maintain as parents you maintain your children. You do that just like Nityo nityanam chetanas chetananam eko bahunam yo vidadati kamat. When Prabhupada explains, one recognizes this, then there's a sense of gratitude to God. He's maintaining everything. And so you want to do something. That's the next stage. You want to do something. It's like, the children becoming attached to mom and dad. But it's not just because their food is being taken care of. There's affection. And Krishna's like that too. So the ability to do that which you're focusing on, where's that ability come from? And when you recognize that, then you want to do something for him. Then you do those things nicely for him. And it's just, bhakti grows like that. It's not going to happen automatically. It'll happen by being thoughtful. And when one is thoughtful, it happens very naturally. Very, very naturally. Just like there's affection between parent and child and parent. It's very natural. Loving parent and a child. And they feel some affection for one another.
Yes, got it, Maharaj. Thank you very much.
Dear Maharaj, when we start talking about attachments, one more question came to my mind.
Sure.
Japa, Mahamantra, Japa, that's what we do. But what if you your mind attached to a different mantra, also with the God's Lord's name, but you like Maha Mantra, but you like some other mantra, would it be a difference, or should we focus more on Maha Mantra, or we can do other mantra?
When you're chanting Maha Mantra, you're focused on Maha Mantra.
Right.
Let me finish. And when you're chanting the other mantra, you're focused on the other mantra.
But I focus on God's name. God has many names.
Well, let's assume the second mantra is one of the names of the Supreme Lord. Then you, when you're chanting Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, for example, I know somebody who's very attached to the Nrsinga mantra. It's the same. You chant when you're chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Be immersed in the holy name. And when you're chanting this other mantra, be immersed in the holy name. And that name of this second mantra, let's say Nrsinga mantra, and you say immersed.
So
and when you get Gayatri mantras, then you're going to be more occupied. Because there's other mantras with other names. No, it's not Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, but you immerse yourself in those names and the mood of that chanting, or Brahma Samhita. There's the refrain, Govinda Madi Purusham, but it's not the Maha Mantra. But you immerse yourself in that sound vibration. Does that answer your question?
yes and no. I was thinking, sometimes I feel I feel that my mind should go back to Maha and read more often Maha Mantra.
Your mind should do what?
I just think that Maha Mantra is more appropriate in this period of time that I'm living, but at the same time, I'm more attached to a different mantra.
Well, it's the same question.
Right.
So I don't understand what yes and no. I don't understand the response. Help me understand your response. What's not connecting for you?
Okay. I do not read 16 rounds
Good.
yet. I do not.
Okay.
I'm just on the way learning, right?
Okay.
So if I read, let's say, 6 rounds a day,
Fine.
and I want to read 3 rounds of Maha Mantra and 3 rounds of another mantra, would that be set? Can I set my mind that, okay, that's satisfying, or I should be lean towards reading 6 rounds of Maha Mantra and continue to increase that number?
This is the question you're asking sounds like a matter of heart, not a matter of rule.
So it's going to be okay if I pick
from the
whatever
heart,
my heart picks.
From the heart perspective, it's okay. From the perspective of qualifying, preparing yourself to become connected to our disciplic succession through formal initiation,
That's my question.
then then the answer is going to be a little different. Because then that's a matter of heart. I want this formal connection. And then you leverage more of the Hare Krishna mantra, because that's going to help you make that formal connection through Diksha. And then comes other mantras that come after that Hare Krishna mantra Diksha, or we've got Brahma Gayatri mantra Dikshas. And, there's other names there also. But it's the descending connection that from the heart level, I want to make that connection. Your choices come from the heart, and therefore it's not a matter of head. So, but if I have some affinity for another mantra, that has its place. It has its place. But the priority goes to wishing to make this formal connection in disciplic succession. And that's what our disciplic succession is asking of you and me and us. It doesn't say other mantras are no-no. Other mantras have their place. And then there's a principal Maha Mantra. The best Maha Mantra, according to the Upanishads, for this particular age of Kali, is the most effective means. Now, other names are fine too.
Thank you, Maharaj. I got the answer.
Got it? Okay. I think that's it. Is that anything online? Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki. Right.